Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. With Sri Lanka being at the centre of attention in the international community, Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper has held firm to his threat to boycott the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting later this year.
Meanwhile, over in the Indian Parliament, India's Foreign Minister Salman Khurshid has said that Sri Lanka is not an enemy of India. We have a comprehensive report coming up in the news, but let's start off with a look at the headlines tonight.
Making headlines this evening, Minister Mahinda Samarasinghe, speaking at the UNHRC session, says that Sri Lanka does not need lessons on good governance and human rights. Minister Maithripala Sirisena charges that there is an attempt to destroy his political image.
මට යමක් දැන නිසායි මම මේ කියන්නේ. මගේ ජීවිතයේ තියෙන අනතුරකයි.
President Rajapaksa instructs for medical fitness tests for students taking part in sports. Also, Thilanga Sumathipala hands in his nomination for chairman of Sri Lanka Cricket.
Minister Mahinda Samarasinghe reiterates that Sri Lanka need not be told or taught about good governance and human rights. The head of the Sri Lankan delegation to the 22nd session of the United Nations Human Rights Council session, Minister Samarasinghe expressed these views at the sessions held this evening in Geneva. Let's now take a look at more excerpts of Minister Samarasinghe's speech.
We believe that resolution number 19/2 on Sri Lanka, which was introduced and adopted at the 19th session of the Council on the 22nd of March 2012, was entirely unnecessary, unwarranted and unfair. Moreover, as is already announced in this Council and elsewhere, a follow-up draft resolution on Sri Lanka, already circulated I believe, is to be introduced at this session a year after the earlier resolution. We strongly object to any unfair, biased, unprincipled and unjust approach that may be adopted by this Council with regard to the protection and promotion of human rights in Sri Lanka. We are therefore firmly of the view that this Council should not embark upon or encourage either debate on or any country-specific resolution by virtue of a selective process which would run counter to the founding principles of this Council. Doing so will clearly reflect an application of double standards.
Minister Mahinda Samarasinghe also shared the following views.
In the post-armed conflict era, we have continued our engagement with human rights bodies, acknowledging the interest that they have in the Sri Lankan situation. We have been candid in our discourse, stating the gains we have made as well as the challenges we face. We have put in place structures for discussion and implementation of solutions. However, we are being told that our chosen path is perhaps the wrong one. It is supposedly deficient. We must be lectured to or even taught. We must be instructed by people who know little of our history, culture and socio-political background. We do not need to be told. We do not need to be taught. These are not culturally relativist arguments, but are values deeply embedded in our social and cultural makeup. We need time and space, Mr. President, to complete our work, and we are confident that we will be able to deliver for our people and our country.
You can watch Minister Mahinda Samarasinghe's complete address to the UN Human Rights Council on our website www.newsfirst.lk. Meanwhile, the US Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asian Affairs, Robert Blake, has said that the US was disappointed about Sri Lanka's failure to address several issues, including the implementation of the LLRC action plan. He made this statement at the Asia Pacific Subcommittee meeting of the US House Foreign Affairs Committee yesterday.
And I must say, progress on thus far on implementing the LLRC action plan has been slow, and we've been disappointed, as you say, that the government has not proceeded so far with elections for the Northern Provincial Council 4 years after the end of the war. We've been disappointed that there hasn't been a conclusion of the dialogue between the Tamil National Alliance, this umbrella group for the Tamil groups, as well as for the TNA dialogue with the government on devolution. And we've been disappointed that there have been some backward movement on democracy, as you say. Things like the 13th Amendment, but also the recent impeachment of Sri Lanka's Chief Justice. So for that reason, last year we supported a resolution in the UN Human Rights Council to put additional pressure on Sri Lanka to implement its own lessons learned and reconciliation report. We did so with the support of countries like India that voted yes, and a large majority of other countries in the Human Rights Council. I think there's good support thus far to have another vote this year to continue to urge Sri Lanka to implement its own report, and that's why we're pursuing that again this year.
Meanwhile, Denise Rollins, the Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Asia Bureau USAID, speaking at a media briefing in Colombo today, said that the U.S. government will not curtail its assistance towards Sri Lanka in light of the fresh resolution in Geneva.
We feel very strongly that the country needs to address those issues very forthrightly, but it doesn't necessarily translate into us, pulling back on our assistance or, not implementing those programs. We have a strong partnership. We're committed to Sri Lanka. We want to continue working with Sri Lanka and the Sri Lankan people. Our development program is focused on the most vulnerable populations in Sri Lanka. And so, I don't believe that we should be punishing those populations because of other things that are taking place in the world.
Going back to Geneva, the representative for the European Union, Deputy Prime Minister of Ireland, Eamon Gilmore, addressing the 22nd session of the UNHRC, said that Sri Lanka should remain on the agenda of the Council.
The EU believes that the current human rights situation in Sri Lanka and accountability and reconciliation should remain on the agenda of this Council. The impartial application of the rule of law is crucial to progress in these areas, and it is essential to safeguard the independence of the judiciary.
Councillor of the Sri Lanka Permanent Mission in Geneva, Priyanka Wickramasinghe, says Sri Lanka should be encouraged in its reconciliation process rather than being singled out for any disproportionate attention in the Human Rights Council. Wickramasinghe made this statement by exercising a right to reply to a statement made by U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for International Organizations, Esther Brimmer, during the high-level segment of the 22nd UNHRC yesterday.
The Council's work remains unfinished so long as Sri Lanka continues to fall short in implementing even the recommendations of its own Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission, or in addressing the underlying sources of its long-standing ethnic conflict. Last year's HRC resolution encouraged brave civil society groups on the ground to continue their efforts. And the United States will introduce another resolution at this session to ensure that the international community continues to monitor progress and to again offer assistance on outstanding reconciliation and accountability issues. The United States hopes that this resolution will be a cooperative effort with the Sri Lankan government.
In response to this statement, Councillor of the Sri Lanka Permanent Mission in Geneva, Priyanka Wickramasinghe, said that Sri Lanka is implementing a comprehensive process of reconciliation involving all communities based on the National Action Plan on the implementation of the recommendations of the LLRC report. Wickramasinghe said that Sri Lanka strongly rejects any unfair, unbiased, unprincipled and unjust approach that may be adopted by the Human Rights Council towards the protection and promotion of human rights of Sri Lanka.
United National Party parliamentarian Karu Jayasuriya says that the government made no preparations whatsoever to face the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva.
ධර්මීමා කරගෙන අපිට දේශපාලන වශයෙන් අවර විනෝදයක් අපි ලබන්නේ. මොකද අපිත් මේ රට ආදරේ.
We do not gain any enjoyment politically by harping on issues like this, because we too are persons who love the country. We also do not agree with all the allegations made by Navi Pillay. We did not see any preparation on the part of the government to face the Human Rights Council in Geneva. They only decided on the head of the delegation that will represent the government 72 hours before the session commenced. Through this, we can see what management is like in the government.
පැය 70කට පැය 72කට ඉස්සරේ. මෙන්න මෙතෙන්දී අපිට පේනවා මොකද්ද රජයේ කල්පනාකාරීත්වය කියලා.
Time now to take a look at today's newspaper cartoon.
Well, as we informed you at the beginning of this bulletin, Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper has held firm on his threat to boycott the Commonwealth Summit in Colombo later this year. Foreign media, quoting Harper's statement in the Canadian Parliament, noted that Harper had indicated that unless changes occur in Sri Lanka, he will not be attending the Commonwealth Summit in the island.
Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper's statement read, quote, I am concerned with further developments since I made that statement which are taking that country in a worse direction, unquote. Foreign media reported that the Commonwealth Secretary-General Kamalesh Sharma has urged Canada to drop its threat to boycott CHOGM in November over allegations of alleged human rights violations. Meanwhile, over in the Indian Parliament, Indian Minister of External Affairs Salman Khurshid said that Sri Lanka is not an enemy of India. Khurshid said, quote, we may have anguish, we may have anger, but we should not be saying that Sri Lanka is an enemy country, unquote. The minister was speaking in response to a statement made by AIADMK leader V. Maitreyan in the Indian Parliament today.